Welcome to the Real Texas Radio Podcast. I am your host, Bronin. Thank you for tuning in, or if this is your first time joining the Real Texas Radio Podcast, 1000 welcomes. It is officially budget season here in Dallas. The city manager has released a draft budget. The city council is discussing it. Well, today, if you're listening to it, the Real Texas Radio Podcast on launch day, the budget workshop is occurring, and there'll be another city council meeting on Wednesday, and city councils and city governments around the state of Texas, they're also debating their budgets. And the bad news is most of these cities, they are raising your property taxes. They, in one form or another, with fees. Your county is raising the property taxes. So we're going to talk about specifically one of the committees here in Dallas, DOGE, and where DOGE thinks there need to be some cuts made that are probably long overdue. I also want to talk about, what do you think about changing the name of the Real Texas Radio Podcast? I've got a suggestion, an idea. If you've been listening to the show for a long time, I think you might already know that this potential title switch could be quite organic, quite natural. And I'll start us off, though, with a quick bum story. So we won't go through the whole rigmarole, but I've just got one bum story. It's been on my mind. I wanted to share it. But before we dive in, please make sure to follow the Real Texas Radio Podcast on X at RTR_Bronin, RTR_Bronin. All the video, all the sound cut that I'm playing on the show today from this DOGE committee meeting, if you want to see the video of it, I'm posting it on X. And please make sure, if you haven't already, to subscribe to the Real Texas Radio Podcast on whichever streaming platform you tune in from. It really makes a big difference. And if you could please give the show a like, particularly in Apple Podcasts or Spotify, that makes a real big difference as well, or on YouTube. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right, now, you're listening to the Real Texas Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Bronin, just a fed-up taxpayer bringing you all of your Texas, local, and national news. All right, we're going to start off with a quick bum story. This actually was from a couple of weeks ago. I'm not going to play the Crack Island theme song. Although, do you know what? Before I get into my bum story, I've been thinking actually for a very long time about changing the name of the Real Texas Radio Podcast. And I've actually been thinking more recently, what if this was retitled the Crack Island Podcast? You're tuning in to the Crack Island Podcast with your host, Bronin. What do you think? I actually think that could be a more engaging title when you're searching for new podcasts to listen to, and Crack Island pops up. What's Crack Island? And, I think a lot of the listeners have caught on to Crack Island and totally support it. And I dare say even some of the politicians are starting to catch on very incrementally, in a very small way at this point. So, bum story. I was actually driving. This was a couple of weeks ago, and I don't drive very often. It was my husband's car. I was picking up dinner, and I'm at an intersection at the red light of a major thoroughfare, two major thoroughfares in Dallas. And there's a bum often. There are usually multiple bums at this intersection in the median, the sun beating down on them. And there was a woman, an older woman, and she is in the median. And I've got the windows down because, I'm really committed to ending climate change, solving climate change. So I don't have the air blasting. I have the hot Texas, like 5:30 p.m. sun just beating down, and I got the jams going. I'm really into live recordings of music lately. I love listening to live albums, and I've got Whitney blasting from her live concert in South Africa. back in 1994, I think. And I am just jamming out to Whitney. Oh, yeah. And then this bum, she comes up to me. She's going to do her cold calling. Excuse me. Sir, do you have a cigarette? Do you have a cigarette? Excuse me. And I'm just totally ignoring the bum, not paying attention. And she's not getting the message that I'm ignoring her. You know, she's enlisting her constitutional right to harass people at a median and beg for money by being a bum, even though you're not supposed to be at this median because it's narrower than 6 feet. So it's against the ordinance of Dallas, and by penalty of, I think, a $500 fine. You're not supposed to be loitering in the median. Do you understand that for the price of a pack of cigarettes, that the bum in the median probably could be easily persuaded to self-deport to Crack Island? You could hand the bum a pack of cigarettes, and I'd even be willing, with tax money, to throw in a whole carton of cigarettes on the condition that the bum gets on the Crack Island ferry with the one-way ticket immediately. And then whole pack of cigarettes, but can't give you a lighter. I'm sorry. On the Crack Island ferry, haven't decided if smoking is going to be allowed, because we know that homeless people, they set fires. They cause very bad fires, like out in California, which Democrats then blame on climate change for weeks and months, and then they figure out, oh, it was a bomb. The bomb did it. So when on Crack Island, one of the very important positions, there's probably going to be a lot of these positions on Crack Island, because all the bums smoke anything, is the cigarette lighter. And maybe it's a machine, maybe it's a person, but you can't give bums anything that causes combustion, because they will set things on fire. It's something that they're known for. It's one of their biggest headaches that they cause. I just keep ignoring her. And sir, she's like screaming louder and louder and louder, trying to get my attention. So now I'm just totally messing with her by just ignoring her. And I didn't want to put the window up, because why should I, as a citizen who is respecting the law and not doing anything wrong, have to change my behavior so that way I have to be less offended by this drug-addicted bum woman? And it's, do you have a cigarette? Sir, cigarette. Now, I'm not smoking a cigarette. I'm not vaping. I'm not smoking weed, as many people like to do nowadays as they're driving. I am not playing with a lighter. I don't have a lighter in my hand. I don't have a matchbook in my hand. I'm not opening a fresh pack of ciggies. Absolutely nothing that I am doing in terms of my conduct suggests that I have a cigarette or that I want to talk to this bum. But she's just not getting the message, like, at all. Just not getting it. So I just keep jamming and jamming and jamming. Yeah. Yeah, Whitney Houston, she smoked. As we know, that was, I think, one of the major reasons for the decay of her singing voice, tragically. Maybe she knew that. Maybe the bum knew, oh, he's listening to Whitney. She was a smoker, infamously. And so maybe, anyway, so I'm not really concerned with prioritizing women at Crack Island. We know the fake news likes to pretend that homeless people are represented heavily by the women and children and families population, when we know we just have to look at the jail records in whichever county, urban counties in the United States, Dallas County. We know we just have to look at the jail records, and our homeless, junkie bum, criminal vagrant, mental patient, ne'er-do-well, recidivist, reprobate population is monopolized by men who are working in military age, doing neither, and they're just drugged out. Women, yes, I know we see them too, but it's really the men who are causing the big problems. But this woman, she really, I wasn't in the mood for her whatsoever. All right. So thank God the light changed green, as the light does, although that it's not a light you want to get stuck in, especially every day during traffic. So let's talk about a group of people who don't have to deal with traffic very often, and that is the Human Resources Department of the city of Dallas. And they came under scrutiny again. They've been in the hot seat, literally. They've been in the hot seat, particularly in respect to the DOGE committee, Dallas's Department of Government Efficiency. I'm interested to see what kind of savings this department is actually going to yield after a year of work. I dare say not much, because you know what ends up happening? The city council, they have these department heads before them, whatever the meeting is, in this case DOGE, and they're asking these department heads, or they're asking these assistant or deputy city managers to say, well, you've got 50 staff, or you've got 30 staff, or whatever it is. Couldn't you do with 10% fewer? If you have 50 staff, couldn't your department function just as well with 45 or 47? Or do you need a bigger budget this year? And they all clam up. I mean, you ask a department head in public on camera, what is the person supposed to say? Oh, yeah, I got all these extra bodies that I have to supervise. I don't need them. Yeah, cut them. You can cut them. Even if they really actually think that they have a bunch of non-jobbers in their department, which they probably don't, they're not going to tell the council, which means just telling the city manager that you can cut the positions. And for those of you, if you live outside of Dallas, you live outside of Texas, the city manager just released her detailed budget over the last week. It's been coming out in drips and drabs, but it's been made available to the public as of August 9th or 10th, I believe. And I haven't done a big deep dive, but the headlines is that the budget overall is growing, huge growth. I think $5.6 billion, up from maybe a little bit over $5 billion last year. Growing, yet the tax rate is going to be cut just symbolically. You're going to see no difference except an increase, because other fees are increasing, like trash pickup, I think, and water. And they're eliminating almost 300 positions in the city of Dallas. Except not really, because I think 2/3 of those were already unfilled vacancies, zombie positions that we obviously don't need because they went unfilled, and now we just said, you know what, we're not going to fill them. So it's more like 100 positions, I think. 100 people are getting cuts. It seems like a lot of those cuts are in the library, and I'm sure all the library people, and God love them, and as a former English teacher for 7 years, and I do use the library, I don't want to dump all over the libraries, but you know what? When I go in to check out my library book, which I do probably a monthly basis, I try to read a book a month, sometimes a little bit more, I can't help but notice there are 2 librarians. I assume they're librarians. They're sitting at the front desk. 2 of them. Doesn't seem like they have a whole lot going on. One of them has got a mask, a COVID mask, and rubber gloves. And then there's another one, and I think there might even be another one in the back who you don't see that much. And then I go over to check out my book. I find my book on the shelf. Usually the book that I want is in another location, so I have to wait a few days. That's fine. The book gets delivered. There's a cost associated with that too. And then I go to the front counter, and I don't hand the book to one of the 2 librarians who are sitting there idly. No, I use one of the 2 self-checkout terminals to check out my own book. So do we need 2 people sitting at that desk? I would like to know. Plus, obviously, we have a police officer who is staffed in there full time, because most of the people in the library are homeless and don't pay for library services at all. So that's what's going on there. There will be some cuts to libraries. But this HR department, well, they're not sitting in traffic very much. Let's go ahead and play a cut from, I think I've got a cut here from, well, let's start off with Maxie Johnson, the chair of the committee.
Further, I've been out to human resource a few times. Not a lot, but a few. And I went down there, to be honest with you, because Chair Mendelson said no one is at work. So I actually went down there a few times. And guess what? One at work. And then I sat here and listened to the HR director advocate and say, we need to give incentives for people to not come to work and pretty much work on the COVID schedule. That was concerning to me. So I'm putting it in my words, but that's pretty much what you said. If you go look at the video, it's out there. Her words was an incentive when you hire people. So when I'm looking at the job responsibility and what we're expecting, my personal view, and just me, I'm 1 out of 15. I believe people should come to work.
Yeah, you know, especially since we're still obviously in the thrust of this city hall debate. Are we going to abandon it? Are we going to go rent more office space? And one of the arguments that I hear about, oh, well, you know, if we decide we're going to renovate City Hall, we're going to get it back up to the original specs of almost 50 years ago. Oh, we're going to have to rent all this office space for the employees. Where are they going to go? And Kara Mendelson has been pointing out to the start, and now, thank God, we've got Maxie Johnson, the chair, to back her up on this. And this is just one department, but it's going on all over the place. Well, it sounds like most people are remote working anyway. It sounds like people, they don't need a physical space. They're already remote working. And here is another cut I'm going to play. This is Kara Mendelson following up on Johnson.
How many of your employees do work from home?
Very similar to the data team. We're also a hybrid schedule. On the specifics, I can get those numbers for you on the hybrid schedules.
What does a hybrid schedule mean to you?
So I think it means different things for me. It means that we're in the office on certain scheduled days.
Wednesdays.
For at least for I can speak to my team.
That's when the city council meetings are
on at least 3 days a week. There are also, but we also make sure we off shift to make sure there's always representation in the office. And that's how I would define hybrid schedule. I think it's the determination from our director for every manager to manage their team that reports to them. And so for me is to make sure that we're there when we need to be there. We're there to represent, to be at meetings, to be front facing, as well as to be sure that, and at least for me, is to make sure we always have that availability. And I think that's the most important thing.
What? Did anybody pick up on that? What is he talking about?
President Trump? I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
That was the assistant HR director, the assistant. It seems like they got a lot of people in leadership, quote unquote leadership, in the HR department. And here's Kara Mendelson again. This is her response to that, whatever that was, that non-answer.
Well, we're having a meeting today, and it's about HR. I would have expected our HR director to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, what about remote? She can't come in on Zoom or Teams. I mean, they just took a month off, didn't they? They just took off July recess. I know not all the staff necessarily, but
you can't do it with Zoom. Well, where's Zoom? She's going to do it with Zoom, and she's not coming.
Yeah, so now we can't even get the HR director to appear on Zoom. She won't appear in person now because, you know why? Because the last time she appeared before this committee or one of the other committees, she was, I don't want to say excoriated, but she received some legitimate questions. One of the questions that she's been asked about, and this comes up a lot, how many of your employees are remote? How many of them are hybrid? Another department, chair was asked. The data analytics department that has almost 40 people in it. Here is Kara Mendelsohn again. This is her asking the data analytics department head about remote work.
And what does a hybrid schedule look like in your department? Can you explain that?
Yeah, people have core days when they are in with their teams, and then there are days when they work remotely.
Core days when you're in with your team. Does that mean every work day is not a core day? Just the days that you come to work is... We're getting little truth nuggets. That accidental truth nuggets are being spilled in a public forum.
And how many are they remote versus how many are they in City Hall?
Most people are in 3 and out 2. Other people are in 4 and out 1. My team was, born in COVID, and we didn't even have a space in the building. So we were remote initially. So we were used to that work. When they prepared a space for us, we were in a situation where we immediately had to hotel because there were not enough.
You immediately had to hotel? Is that a verb now? To hotel? And you know what? I actually, I know I complain about COVID, but I get to complain about COVID because it was foisted upon me, and I was harassed by all of the Church of COVIDology, the clergymen and women, and all of the parishioners who happen to be most of the population in the United States, who harassed me about it. But you know what? You don't get to talk about, oh, back in COVID 6 years ago, like you're swapping war stories here. And then you were forced to hotel. I wonder how much it costs to hotel a staff of almost 40 people.
Desks, and so that was something that just sort of came naturally, that hybrid approach.
Every time I've been to your department, not a single person's been there. I'm just going to tell you that's the truth.
I did not know that you had ever visited us.
I know, because you weren't there.
Oh, mic drop. So that's data analytics, and I think data analytics, the department head, she puts up a slide deck and says, oh, we've saved $11 million over the last 2 years. 40 people, $11 million. The budget is $5.6 billion. Are we supposed to be impressed? Are we supposed to be impressed by that? I don't know. And you look at the resumes of these people, these department heads. They went to all fancy colleges. This isn't a difficult question. How many people are remote? I can get that to you. I'll get it to you by the end of the week, the end of the day. You don't know how many people are remote in your department, and you've been remote since the COVID hoax, farce, nonsense scam? You don't know who's remote and who's hybrid? You can't tell me on which days which people are coming into the office? You have no idea. You're the assistant director. And do you know what? You know that Kara Mendelsohn is going to ask these questions. One, because she's asked them many times before. But two, you know her attitude about the HR department. So if I'm the HR department and I know that I'm being called before the DOGE committee, which I think Kara Mendelsohn was on, I don't think she was just there as a guest. I'm not sure everybody's committee assignment. But if you know that Kara Mendelsohn is going to be there, then she's the councilwoman from District 12. She's the chair of public safety. You know that all of her questions, they typically are about, do we need to spend this much money? Are we spending too much here? Do we need this many employees? Do we need this program? Is this just excessive? Is this a nice to have, or is it a need? And I've got another cut here from the director, or the assistant director, because the actual director, I think, was a little too chicken bleep to show up to get her shellacking. And I should have maybe prefaced this with get the vomit bag, but the assistant director, he was asked about how many people are working in this wellness and engagement team embedded in the HR department. Wellness and engagement. Here he is.
Tommy Mills, Assistant Director of Human Resources. Earlier last year, the director of human resource and errors, we made a decision to start a new group of existing resources with the employee and wellness engagement team. And part of those wellness engagement activities is to connect with employees to make sure they assign all the wellness activities that we have. We do know that there is probably not the best connection communication we had to connect employees to all the activities that we have to make sure we can try to bring in some better information for them to receive the medical or wellness care. And so part of those wellness activities is to make sure that here's a slew of programs.
Okay, what a load of BS. What a load of BS. Do you have any trouble, those of you who are working, whether it's in the private sector or whether you are employed, do you have any problem understanding if you receive them health benefits? Probably not, because do you know what all the major health plans do? They constantly bombard you with emails and sometimes even texts and sometimes even physical snail mail telling you where to go if you want to learn more about your benefits. We need 3 people dedicated to telling people about their benefits. And what benefit do you think they're touting the most? It sounds like these GLP-1s, the Ozempic, the Roe, Wegovy, all that kind of thing. Because do you know what the city manager honed in on in this current budget? Is reducing the employee health care benefits, because maybe this HR group, they're doing the job so well, they're getting all these people onto these GLP-1s. I thought they were supposed to reduce healthcare costs. I thought you were supposed to get slim, and then therefore all of the diseases that are the offspring of obesity, you're supposed to reduce those drastically. Those are all the most expensive diseases and illnesses, putting all the pressure on your organs, on your knees, on your hips, diabetes, and the like. And you know what? We can't have this in public government. We cannot have this. That was redundant. You can't have this in the private sector. Pardon me, in the public sector. If the private sector wants to lavish employees with certain benefits and wants to have extra people working at the company, then that's fine. But we can't have that with tax dollars. And you know, this HR department, I think there's about 50 people. There's waste and there's redundancy all over the place. And obviously everybody's trying to save their own neck. But this is just a small reflection of problems. This is Maxie Johnson again talking to the HR department. And
you know, when I went and saw what Chair Mendelson said a few times, they tell no one I was going. I just went and didn't make no fuss about it, didn't say anything to the city manager. But I just noted it, say duly noted. So that is a concern when we're talking about budget and being efficiency. If we're paying folks, I'm not paying folks to be home. I'm not paying folks to be virtual all the time. I'm paying folks because we're paying folks, the taxpayers' dollars want you here at work to do the job so we can have a better city.
Yeah. So I don't want to hear anymore about, even if we renovate Dallas City Hall, we need to rent out space for 3,000 people who work in the building. We need to go sign a 5-year lease for these people. Now, you know what? We have 29 libraries. We've got over 100 schools and DISD, maybe even more than that. We've got empty campuses. We've got plenty of buildings around already. But you know what? It sounds like most people prefer to work at home, and they want to keep it a secret, though. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about any of that, not publicly. And so, I don't know what to tell you. Just because you're working from home, I know some people, especially boomers, a lot of them have a really negative perception of work from home. And I'll be honest, I work from home, and I'm not going to get too much into what I do for my employment. This is volunteerism here, community service, and fun. I don't really have any hobbies. But, if I am going to have to be called to account at a public meeting or in front of my boss, and my boss is looking for pretty basic metrics, in details about what I'm doing all day and what benefit I'm bringing to the organization, I've got a list I can refer to pretty handily, just in case I don't have memorized my metrics. Although it's clear to my boss what I'm doing. Anyway, I'm not going to get into it, but this was just a window that I wanted to share with you, because city governments across Texas, they're having problems with the budget. Not that they don't have enough money, because I think from what I can see from the early budget, it looks like even more property taxes are coming in from appraised values going upward. Although I'm proud to say I made a lot of wins in that department. But and a lot of my neighbors I encouraged, and some of my other neighbors encourage other neighbors to protest their property valuation. I hope they meet with success. And we have to just claw back the money from these people. You have to just cut the budget, and you cannot ask these public sector department heads or assistant city managers for recommendations for cuts, because they're not going to make them. They're going to defend the staff, and they probably should, right? You should defend your team. It's part of morale. It's part of feeling safe at work, right? You don't want your boss, constantly advocating for cuts. That doesn't put the boss in a good situation either. So that's where the city manager just has to come in and say, we're cutting X amount of positions. 100 real positions is too few. And you have to make more cuts. You just have to. And that's true everywhere. And we need to be looking at these nonprofits that are non-performing. That's what a lot of them should be renamed, non-performing instead of non-profits, because they're doing a lot of profiting, but they're not performing. And you can listen to my last episode. I talk all about Housing Forward, one of our underperforming, non-performing grifter nonprofits here in Dallas County, which has got their hands in every single honeypot, got their face at the trough everywhere there's government dollars available, including the city of Dallas. And I hope the city should not be spending any more money on these bums at all, bringing it back to bums as it usually happens. $10 million last year went to Housing Forward. They got another $10 million from the county. Now they're about to shaking us down November 3rd for another $150 million a year. They are a total shameless disgrace, bunch of hacks. So to make a long story short, we know there are hacks everywhere. And do you remember in the federal government under the second Trump administration, right when Trump got back into office and Elon Musk launched DOGE, and he asked everybody in the federal government, all of the bureaucrats, submit a list to your boss each week. I think it was 5 things you did this week. Small list. Just give us a list. 5 things. How many of them, the revolt that occurred as a result of that ask? How embarrassing are you? You have a 40-hour-a-week job or more, and you can't just jot down 5 things that you did at work this week? Why is that so offensive to be asked to do that? How easy is that? Not a paragraph. You can't just look back at your calendar, meetings that you've attended, in an important discussion you had, or God forbid, a task actually completed. You did X number of reports, whatever the case might be. And you know what? We have this Office of Inspector General here in Dallas, and I don't know who mandated this, or the department is self-reporting, but they put out a quarterly publication, and then they are supposed to, or they put out a monthly report to let us know what's going on. And the last report publicly available on their website, and I emailed them last week asking for the more recent reports, but the currently most recent available report from the Office of the Inspector General, which is supposed to be, an ethics watchdog in the city, really effective. Really effective. May. They didn't put out a report in June. They didn't put out a report for July yet. And the quarterly report came out late. They're really dragging. So, I think, I don't know if they're hiring more positions in the Office of the Inspector General office. I don't know how many people are in there, but there are multiple investigators and lawyers, and then they've got the support staff as well. Presumably, I don't know who's putting this report together, but the June report is not available. The July report is not available. And they voluntarily put this out in the interest of transparency and accountability, and in wanting to let the public know what they're doing, all the trainings and the proactive posture that they're taking. So I know you might think it's boring and tedious, but it all goes back to, you just have to cut the taxes. You have to stop giving them so much money, because, and by they, I mean especially your Democrats, but Republicans are guilty of it too. Your local, county, state, federal government, money is being blown left and right. COVID just provided this cash infusion that was so gross, and got all of these city governments hooked like fentanyl addicts. And that's gone. I know that the Democrats are very sad that COVID is gone. They're very sad. It was so wonderful for them. It turned their hack positions, it more deeply embedded them in the hackorama. And so now, and what we've known for years is, now they're not going to work. They haven't been going to work. Maybe they're not even needed. And so we need to get a lot tougher here, because 73% of the budget is personnel, and that includes the fire and the police. I wasn't going to talk much about the fire, but I understand we have Prop U, public safety, which means the city of Dallas, they need to get the officer total count up to 4,000. They need to increase the pay to be competitive in the region. I voted for Prop U. I supported it, and I don't think very much hiring would have occurred without this extra push from the voters. And apparently we still have a lot of attrition. That's what Kara Mendelson was saying. She chairs public safety. There's still a lot of attrition with officers. I don't know where they're going, presumably to the burbs, where there are fewer homeless, junkie, bum, criminal, vagrant, mental patient, ne'er-do-well, recidivist reprobates to deal with. Presumably, I think we've had over 80 murders so far this year, which is, I think it's like 2.5 a week. And we've had a number of recent officer-involved shootings. It's a very dangerous job to be a police officer, particularly in the South of the United States, where we seem to have an overrepresentation, an abundance of bleep bums, of no good layabouts, criminals, addicts, all kinds of problems. A lot of it's a young man problem too. We know young men, just regardless of their race, or they're just completely out of their minds and prone to violence and aggression. So we have a big problem with that too. We got a lot of apartment buildings that are basically just projects, where you've got just a bunch of Hatfields and McCoys and warring family members all living together and just creating trouble. We've got a lot of that. We've got entertainment districts, I won't name any specifically, that have a lot of problems at certain times of the day, on certain days of the week, like very, very early Sunday after the bars close. So we've got those kind of problems. So if you're a police officer, you're risking your life, and your pay needs to reflect that risk. I do feel confident about that. That said, police are not going to solve homelessness. Policy needs to solve homelessness. The policy needs to be Crack Island. And if we had Crack Island, we wouldn't need as many police officers, because we know that the category that these homeless end up in is criminal trespass. So a lot of them are just getting picked up for criminal trespass, wasting everybody's time. The county, the jail, the court, the judge, the public defender office, DART police, so on and so forth, bumming for cigarettes in the median, junkies. Crack Island, just open it up, send them all there, and you'll be reelected to whatever office you want. You will. You'll be reelected in perpetuity if you keep Crack Island open. That's my position on that. That's what I think needs to happen. But the fire department, obviously, running into a fire is a huge risk to life safety and health. But since the 1980s, there has been a drastic decrease in fires because of all of the technology that we now have. We have the sprinklers in new builds. We've got the fire alarms that are, you don't just stick a battery in the fire alarm. Now the fire alarm needs to be connected, I think, directly to 911 services in new builds. We fire extinguishers all over the place. And we just fire retardant materials used in building and other kinds of materials that would be in a house. And so as a result, fires are just way down. I think the upgrades to electrical infrastructure and individual outlets, many reasons, many developments over the course of decades have occurred to make fires much less of a problem. So, when I see the fire truck, and I hear it a lot, I'm close to a fire station. And you know what? The unit where I'm sitting right now, the room that I am sitting in right now, caught fire years ago from a candle from a previous occupant and caused significant damage to the property, to other units. Directly across the street from my house, there was a single family house once upon a time that caught fire. From homeless, junkie, bum, criminal, vagrant, mental patient, ne'er-do-well, recidivist, reprobate, squatters, quite possibly, quite likely. And actually, I own a property in another district in Dallas, and well, there was a fire a couple doors down. Thank God my home was not affected by it, but that house is now condemned, unlivable. So I'm not saying that fires don't happen, and I know that auto fires out in the highway, if there's an accident on the freeway and there's a fire, then the fire department's going to show up. But I have a suspicion that fire truck, which gets a mile of diesel, I think, per hour, something like that, 1 mile per gallon, excuse me, of diesel, $1 million vehicle. Didn't one of them take a pitch over one of the highway overpasses, like I-45 last year, destroyed? $1 million vehicles, and they are dispatched in many cases, possibly in many more cases than not. When that fire truck is leaving the station, it's not responding to a fire, either a house or a business or a vehicular fire at the scene. And I know the firemen, they show up, the firefighters, sometimes, okay, even if there's no fire, you need the jaws of life. It's Dallas. We have many car accidents all day long. I know the fire truck is used to help with traffic flow and safety. They block the highway so that way the personnel, the first responders, are protected or shielded somewhat, at least with the fire truck. Okay, maybe that's a good use of the fire truck. I still think that truck is over deployed, and I think it's very costly. And I don't know that firefighters should be used in many of the cases that they're used for somebody who had a fall, for all kinds of reasons. And okay, I'm putting it out there. I think that that's a department that maybe it doesn't need to be growing, not just in Dallas, but everywhere. If we know the fires are down, and we're talking about down huge, I think like 70, 80+% fires are down. And those EVs, if they catch fire, you can't turn a hose onto the EVs. That doesn't stop the fire. You got to throw sand on them, or you got to let the fire just extinguish itself. Eventually it dies out. So I'm pointing that out. We talk about the police gobbling up a huge portion of the budget, as they do in every city, in most cities. But now Dallas has more directives in terms of directing more revenue to the public safety. But the fire, I'm just food for thought. And then, of course, the pensions. The pensions, that's a huge obligation of the city for everybody, but particularly for the police and fire. And, once upon a time, the whole purpose of a government pension was the government didn't used to pay that much. It was not parity with the private sector. You could make more in the private sector. So in order to entice people to apply to civil service jobs, to government jobs, to become teachers, the state, the city, whatever the government authority, they had a pension plan. That was one of the major benefits. Well, a lot of these government jobs and city jobs, not only are they still getting a pension, defined benefits, pension, defined payout, but now the salaries look a lot more similar, if not even greater than the private sector. So that needs to be accounted for. That's a larger discussion that's not going to be solved in Dallas, I don't think, or in San Antonio or Austin or anywhere else where Democrats are in charge. All right, I am Bronin. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Crack Island. Just kidding. The Real Texas Radio Podcast. Please follow the show on X at RTR_Bronin, RTR_Bronin. And if you haven't already, please make sure to like, subscribe, download the Real Texas Radio Podcast from wherever you stream your podcasts. And I'll catch you on the next episode.